What if losing a limb didn't just change your life, but took your talent to the next level? Today on the Amped Up to 11 podcast, we're talking to Jason Barnes, a drummer, producer, and music innovator who refused to let amputation end his passion. After an accident nearly took everything, he built his own prosthetic, then teamed up with Georgia Tech to create a cyborg drumming arm that gives him superhuman speed and precision. From breaking Guinness World Records to performing worldwide, Jason's story is a wild mix of resilience, technology, and the future of music. Buckle up, this one's gonna be electric. Let's get amped up with Jason Barnes. Hey everyone, we have Jason Barnes here, the bionic drummer. I am super excited about this episode. As many of you know, I'm a drummer myself. So the opportunity to have a drummer on the show is pretty monumental for myself because this is my opportunity to nerd out over drumming and what we do in our craft as drummers, things of that nature. Jason is a arm amputee. I'm a leg amputee. So, hey, maybe we have the semblance of like one drummer here today kind of thing, you know?
One full body.
Exactly. How you doing, Jason? Great to see you.
Thanks, man. Great to see you too. Thanks for having me on.
And where are you today? Where in the world?
I'm in New York right now. I'm based out of Atlanta, though.
Got it. And why are we in New York today?
I'm in New York for a couple meetings I have with some investors for my nonprofit that I started about a year ago.
That's awesome. Well, let's talk about that first. That's exciting.
Thanks. Awesome. Yeah. So, I don't know if you're familiar with, my journey or my story at all, but
Been researching.
We can get into that a little bit later. I can go into it now.
I think where I want to start with you is specifically, I think our paths are similar to some degree. And what I mean by that is I was very much influenced by my father as a musician. And, my home life was watching him, and his appreciation for music, which sort of channeled that energy over to myself. And, being someone that was immersed. I'm a lot older than you, but at the time in, Motown and rhythm and blues and, all of this sort of groove oriented, music, drumming was just something that, I took to very naturally. Your father was a guitar player, correct?
Yeah, he was a guitar player. He was a well-known guitar player in Australia. That's
Awesome.
where my two older siblings were born. But yeah, I picked up music from a young age from him. I grew up watching him play guitar, and I think I finally started to try and pick it up and learned "Smoke on the Water," everybody's first song. Probably when I was like 11 or 12. And yeah, I just never really followed through with it so much. I think probably life factors and ADHD and whatever. And I think at one point my parents were just kind of sick of me beating on the dinner table all the time, and they were like, "Let's get this kid a drum set," And day one, I feel like I picked it up fairly naturally. I was jamming with my dad, playing Eric Clapton and BB King, and because my dad was a blues guitarist, so that was kind of
That's awesome.
Growing up.
Yeah, and I think those early sort of neural pathways, always get really hardwired quick when we're young. And if we can get exposed to music in that way, in a creative sense, those things tend to come a lot more naturally. Because I'm at an age now, believe it or not, where I have some friends that are retired and they are pursuing music for like the first time in their life. And they're thinking, well, I always wanted to play guitar. And now I'm taking guitar lessons. And they're like, oh my God, is it fucking hard? Like my hands hurt. I've realized I have no sense of time. And I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm just getting frustrated. And I think to myself, yeah, it really wasn't that kind of experience for me either. when I was young because it's kind of like someone asking you, do you remember struggling to learn how to talk as a kid? No. It's just sort of an organic thing. It just sort of
Mhm.
happens. Whereas with music
Yeah.
at a young age, we're sponges when we're young. We're sort of taking
Oh,
it
yeah.
all in, and things just sort of come on board and we just assimilate, right? And suddenly
Mhm.
all those foundational skills that we employ, especially as drummers, they just get kind of embedded like into our little genetic code of music. And you know,
Absolutely.
yeah, and I always think to myself, if there was, as an amputee, if there was anything that I wanted to lose, especially as a drummer, it would definitely not be my hands. Um, losing, my right leg, my kick drum leg, certainly there was a big learning curve. It was, it was hard. I mean, sort of, I guess, rewiring or relearning the instrument. But I always think, man, I have these, right? And doing the research on your particular story, going through what you went through in 2012 and then wanting to play so badly that you literally took, your your bandaged, amputated residual limb and like taped a drumstick to it just to be able to revisit the instrument that you loved. I mean, that to me really resonated with me.
Yeah, I mean, that's the power of music, you know? I was going stir crazy. I essentially kind of lost, everything after the accident. I couldn't pay my bills. I had this massive hospital bill. I lost my house. I ended up having to move back into the guest bedroom at mom's house. And then, on top of it, I lost my hand. So it was kind of just going stir crazy trying to figure out what I was going to do. And, the first few weeks there, I was definitely very depressed and mopey, as anybody would be. And, I kind of just wallowed in it for a second and just realized that there was essentially only one way out or no way out, you know? And so it was just kind of like, well, if you're going to be positive and make your way out of it, why not just go 100%, you know? And so, yeah, that's when I drug my drum kit out and I was like, I'm going to proceed to see how this works and how it feels, And although it wasn't that great, um, it was the moment that I just first started playing the kit after I taped the drumstick to my arm. It was just like my brain just started flooding, one with all of these emotions, and then two with all of these ideas of how to get out of this, and then the rest is history. So, but
Yeah.
yeah, that's a great testament to the power of music. It's a very
And
powerful
watching
thing, and it
that for
heals.
me was very impactful because, and I've written about this, I had a conversation with my orthopedic surgeon and, I asked him like, how am I going to do these things? How am I going to do the things that I love? And he was very honest with me, which kind of shocked me at first. He's like, I don't know. And I thought, wow, that's harsh. But then he said, you're going to do all the things that you want really badly. If you want them bad enough, you know, like you're saying, the power of music, if you want it bad enough, you'll do it. It's really just a matter of your resilience, your grit. How badly do you really want to put yourself back behind that drum kit? And, I was so desperate to play after my amputation. I set up a remote pedal, uh, for my left foot, and I learned how to play right-handed, right, but using my left foot on the kick drum, which was bizarre, right? Because that wasn't the way my body had learned the instrument. But again, it's such an exercise in adaptation. And when I think about your story and the way in which you've adapted and then gone to the next level, way beyond into, bionics and everything that you've done in that space, um, with the arm that, I've seen in all these videos, and it's just, that you've won world records with that. It's remarkable to me, just that pressing into the technology and the adaptation piece, and then understanding the tech in the sense of your residual limb is actually sending those signals to that robotic arm. And because at first I'm kind of like, wow, does he just press it and it just does what he wants, what's preset or this or that? And I really appreciate that you break it down for the layperson to understand that no, it's actually controlled by me, and this is how it's done. So,
Yeah, I mean the goal with it was to kind of make it easily interchangeable from individual to individual was kind of my concept building it, because again, like it's great if we build all this revolutionary technology, but if I'm the only one that has it, or it just kind of becomes this gimmick, then it's like what's the point? You know what I mean? You get to show it off online, people get to see it, and then it never goes anywhere. And so, my goal with it was to have the control mechanisms be extremely flexible. So, you can control them using your muscles. It can just pick up every single EMG signal that you send it. You can, if you don't have the ability to send signals that fast or that strong, you can have pre-programmed patterns. You can do these things. You can input MIDI into it. So
wow.
you can plug it into Ableton like a MIDI controller, and literally route MIDI through it and have it play MIDI notes. So I mean, yeah, my goal with it was to kind of make it easily interchangeable for everybody, because not every amputee is the same, and not everybody with a disability is the same. Everybody's a little bit different, and so just because it works with me doesn't mean it was going to work with everybody else. So
So
and that's kind of
those
what
of
led me
us,
into the nonprofit.
yeah, and for people who don't know, you lost your hand um, in an electrical accident at work. What exactly happened? I mean, I think it's mentioned in a video somewhere, but explain it for the audience what was going on that day.
Yeah, so it was January 2012. I personally barely remember any of it. Most of anything that I know is memories that have slowly came back, or from my assistant slash best friend that worked with me at the time, or information from the fire department, which is across the street, who essentially rescued me. But yeah, no, I was at work. I used to clean restaurant exhausts. So we used to clean the vent hoods, the ducts, the fans on the roof, the whole exhaust system for the restaurants, for the kitchens. And I was up on a roof in a very old town square. And yeah, so at 1 minute, I just remember being spooked in a flash of light and yelling to my friend to get down. And the next thing I know, I'm waking up in the hospital roughly, I know, a day later. So apparently what had happened is a transformer exploded, kind of freak accident. Where it was very, very close to where I'm standing on the side of the building. None of the lines were shielded. So essentially arced in my back and then exited through the right side of my body. So in the left side and the back, and then out the front right side of my body. It's kind of interesting how electricity works.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
and also I wasn't grounded, so um, I'm wearing rubber waders to keep water out of my boots, because we use pressure washers and things of that nature. So um, yeah, woke up in the hospital. I had no idea what had happened. Subconsciously, I remember hearing a boom noise. I thought something exploded, or we were being attacked or something. I had no idea. And yeah, they informed me that I was electrocuted, that I had been involved in an electrical accident. And yeah, I was in the hospital for about 4 or 5 weeks trying to save my right hand, various surgeries, and ultimately decided to amputate it. I'm a pretty skinny guy anyway, and there wasn't really much left of my ulnar artery or anything in there. So and then also I was born left-handed, so um, I lost my right hand below the elbow. Most people I know involved in a similar accidents, um, not only have lost their life, but lost three, four limbs at a time. So, I got extremely lucky to lose my right hand below the elbow.
Yeah.
Um, Kind of a blessing in disguise. And then, like I said, I would never take it back. It kind of led me down um, this path in life that I'm currently traveling. That, like I said, I would never change, to be honest. So
Yeah, and I say that often too. I'm like, "No, I wouldn't change it." It's it's actually really made my life way more interesting. Um,
it's
and
not only has it
just
made my life interesting, but with me starting the nonprofit and everything, it just I realized that I had this capability at low cost or no cost to be able to help people with, my journey and some of the technology that we've helped develop. And so, that's one of the bigger reasons why I say I would never take it back. It's definitely made my life interesting. I've gotten some interesting gigs out of it, and I wouldn't have made a robotic, drumming prosthetic if it wouldn't have happened. And now, I wouldn't be able to help, you know, a ton of other people around the world in similar situations. So
yeah, for sure.
there's no going back now.
Yeah, there's no going back, man. You're in the deep end of the pool, as they say, you know?
Yeah.
We are immersed, you know? I wanna talk about, Gil Weinberg. I mean, what a brilliant dude, and
Yeah,
some
he
of
really
the
is.
video blogging that I've seen, that you guys have shared with the world, how did that relationship come about? Because he was sort of the, in a way, the catalyst of, how you were able to get into the robotic space and start to explore the possibilities of that incredible, arm that you use now to play. So how did you meet him?
Um, Honestly, fate. um, no, very fate and the help of a very hardworking teacher of mine. So after I'd lost my arm, I modified this kind of version and developed my own basic mechanics prosthetic for playing drums. So it just uses a spring, um, two bearings, and then two leverage points.
Which, by the way,
And
was really genius because I did zero in on that, and and I kept thinking to myself, is that the spring from a kick pedal that he put on there?
so that device originated. It's a lot different now, but originally it was a TRS device.
Okay.
Um, and the concept was kind of there, but and again, no offense, it's just not made by a drummer. So great concept. And what I did is I modified off it to be able to mimic the act of like drop catching a stick, so releasing the grip on the stick and then being
Yeah.
able to tighten the grip again. And so I modified it to where it has a few millimeters of play in where essentially would be your wrist. And so what that does is combined with the spring and then the pivot point where your fingers would be. If I am just moving my residual limb, just my elbow, like this, so like up and down, not because I don't have my wrist. What it does is it picks up the force from my elbow, and I can actually get pretty fast single strokes with it.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it originated with a kick drum pedal spring at first, which was a little too tight. And then I ended up ordering like a pack of various springs online and kind of just went through them and tried them out and discovered, which one worked best for me. And I've designed it now because we've started making a similar device for other amputees around. So, we've helped currently to two guys around the world get their own drumming prosthetic kind of set up the same way. And what I realized with them, one of them is a left-hand amputee. They play right-hand kit, so that's their snare hand. Um, but yeah, different springs for different kind of uses and different people depending on where their amputation is, where the length is, etc. So try to make it kind of customizable again to the individual, not just here's what you get, figure out how to use it.
Yeah, and I'm gonna
Um,
redirect back to Gil, but I
yeah,
think
yeah, I was
what's
about to
important
get into that.
yeah, I think what's important to note that a lot of people don't realize about drummers, drumming, stick control, things like that, is most people will just think we grip a stick very rigid, right? And it's all about how fast your forearm or your wrist can move. That's actually not the thing. The thing to developing good stick control is understanding, the
How the stick
energy
moves.
return that
Mhm.
occurs when you strike a drum. And holding a stick in more of a loose fashion, if you're using, a normal human hand, is that there's a lot of movement that occurs. And someone will say, well, how do you play eighth notes? How do you play quarter notes? And most people don't realize that the stick is actually doing a lot of the work. And your physical self, although it's creating a movement, it's not necessarily driving the notes. The stick is actually doing it. So when I saw that initial design that you created, I was like, that's brilliant, because it gave him the energy return that he was looking for when you naturally play with a drumstick in your hand. Because, like you said, you could just tape it on real tight and just be like, okay, now I'm just going to, you know, kind of push it like this and hopefully get something out of it. But you lose that fluidity that occurs in
Mhm.
drumming when, and again, getting into like the nerdy drum stuff, with like ghost notes and all of that stuff that creates feel and groove, things that most people that listen to music don't really understand, but they feel it, right? There's something there that is sort of driving the feel, making the train move, where drummers understand that it's a very nuanced kind of thing, right? So I really zeroed in on that particular demonstration when you were showing, exactly how the stick, and we'll put this on the podcast, the way the stick was constructed and how you brought those pieces together. But anyway, sorry about all the drum talk. Back to Gil.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, it's kind of building off what we're talking about. But
Yeah.
so, yeah, I developed that first version and it allowed me to kind of play very solid radio music, popular music.
Yep.
Was I playing, really fast Neil Peart stuff? Depends what song, but most likely not. Really fast jazz patterns, swing notes. Very hard getting that swing note in there because it's a lot of stick control again. And with it being just a manual device, you can't adjust the grip strength like in
Sure.
real time.
Yep.
So, um, what as I started getting comfortable with the prosthetic, I enrolled into Atlanta Institute of Music and Media for drums and percussion. And within the first few weeks there, they had it organized to where you had private lessons with each of the teachers there a week. And so one of my teachers, Eric Sanders, phenomenal drummer, phenomenal teacher. He's kind of, the key to how this whole thing started. But, we did our first private lesson and he was like, show me this thing. I was really curious on like what my limitations were and how this thing works. And so I kind of showed him what I could and couldn't do and explained to him, why I can't do certain things and, what would help. And, I basically had this idea of just like, how these prosthetics works, it uses EMG on both sides. So it's kind of essentially open and closed. So an EMG signal, the concept in my head before I really knew anything about robotics or EMG was, essentially picking up the electrical signal from my muscles. So the harder I grip, the harder the grip on the stick would be. So I can get singles or buzz rolls, etc. And then the more that I extend, the looser it would be. So then you can get, triples, whatever. And that obviously that has to be something electronic and robotic because it has to be controlled in real time. And now we're talking about insane dexterity on top of latency issues because it's music. It's one
Yep.
thing if it's just, oh, think a signal and grab the cup, but when you're talking about music, you don't really have time to have delays and latency. You know what I mean? So that was a um, huge thing to cross there, obstacle to cross there. And so I explained these things to Eric, and he was like, I teach private lessons to a student that goes to Georgia Tech, and he is in the music technology department, and his professor makes all these crazy musical robots. And then he showed me a video of Shimon, which is the four-armed marimba playing robot that Gil has developed.
Yeah, I've seen it.
His baby. Yeah. And so I was like, this is incredible. And so Eric was like, I'll send an email to my student and see what we can find out. And you know, um, a few days later, Gil Weinberg sent me an email and was like, "This is the coolest thing I've ever heard. I'm looking for my next project, and um, I make artificially intelligent musical robots, and you kind of need an artificially intelligent musical robot. And so, our kind of ideas and projects went hand in hand, unintended.
Yeah.
um, yeah, and that was kind of the start of our journey there. And then, we since then, we've developed various different prosthetics for various different purposes. Um, we started with the first drumming prosthetic, which was funded by the National Science Foundation and a few other organizations. And their stipulations is they were very interested in AI, and the AI music aspect of it. And so my whole thing was when we first started developing it, I wanted to be able to control the stick. So I wanted to be able to control the grip strength. I wanted to be able to send EMG signals to create single strike. So like, just like I would be playing a swing pattern, like for jazz, I could do that and then it would send a signal to the stick, no latency, and then I could play a swing pattern. Um, and so while we started achieving this, I guess kind of the stipulations from the grants was we have to utilize this AI music thing. And so that's where the idea of the second stick kind of came into play.
Yep.
And conceptually and technologically, great idea. Musically and kind of from a drummer standpoint, it's interesting, sure, it has capability. I personally am not a huge fan of AI music when it comes to creativity.
Yeah.
Now embellishing things and adding on to things is one thing, but again, when you have this AI stick that is just, oh, it understands like music theory and where it wants to play, but then it's just like play some random rhythms or play some AI generated rhythms over these sections, and so you can get some really interesting things. But from a perfectionist standpoint and for usability, essentially, it just made more sense to have one stick. And so that was the latest version that we co-developed with the help of Google,
Yeah.
which just uses one stick, and there's no quote unquote cheating with that one. You can input MIDI with that one, but that one works just directly off my muscles. So what it allows me to do is nothing extraordinary. But for the first time since I lost my hand, I'm able to start with really slow double stroke rolls into a buzz roll, back out into doubles
Yeah.
in real time with no latency. And so,
Yeah.
that 10 years later, give or take 9 years later, was kind of a phenomenal feeling being able to do that. I had gotten so used to just my basic arm or the other arm and just kind of figuring out how to work with them that it was so strange trialing this one and testing it. And yeah, the first time I was able to just get those doubles into buzzes and back out, I was like, that is so strange. Like
Yeah.
it was
I
incredible.
bet.
And again, from an outsider standpoint, it's just cool. There's robotics involved and it's a drumming thing, but it's like you're talking about, and even piano or guitar, you're talking about something that requires like an insane amount of dexterity. One, and then two, it's music, so there can't be latency.
Right.
And the problems that we're solving with that have the potential to solve a lot of other robotics issues when it comes to latency and things like that too, because if something can play chords and splay its fingers and play piano and jam with someone with no latency, then I mean you're solving a lot of issues there, and even the medical field when it comes to like medical robots and
Yep.
things like that. So
Exactly.
um yeah.
I I have a
uh
curious question for you. Um, I'm sure you know who Rick Allen is from Def Leppard.
of
Do
course.
you think that had he experienced his amputation now, in this moment, given the advancements, given how things have changed so much in the world of amputees and robotics and all of this, even the AI piece. I mean, obviously the guy adapted, right? He figured out a way to compensate. I'm not
Hmm.
trying to sell any of that short because I've definitely done deep dives on how he goes about composing, right? Creating his phrasing and drumming, how he's utilizing his feet way beyond what I could ever imagine doing behind a
Hmm.
drum kit. Um, so kudos. I mean, damn, you did it. But do you think that if that amputation happened in this moment, that he might have considered like that design, that piece of technology to say, yeah, if I can control it, if I can control that stick through a robotic prosthesis, that's almost like a no-brainer. I mean, it's a much smoother, sort of faster transition to more of a traditional style of playing. I've often thought that, right? I mean, I don't know if you even have a take on that, because obviously the guy's, he's a pro drummer and very successful career and everything else, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
And there's a lot of other variables involved too. Again, timing, and then the type of guy he is. I know he loves the pedals. I'm sure he's very anti tech when it comes to these. And then also like the amputation. It's different. There's a lot of variables there, like not having your elbow is a big,
Yeah,
you know, making, and even outside of the world of drumming, a lot of upper extremity amputees, have a lot of issues with wearing prosthetics when it's above the elbow. It's just another degree of movement there that is just more complex than just swinging a knee or an ankle, right? And
yeah,
so it becomes cumbersome. It's heavy, so there's those variables involved there, but um yeah, I don't really have much of a take. I know Rick, I think he would be very against the tech aspect of things for sure.
yeah. And I think you're right. I think it's a very personal choice. It's a very individual choice. If someone came to me and said, "Hey, I can give you a prosthesis that will read your residual limb impulses and control your prosthetic foot. We can make that happen." At this point, I mean, I'm good. Like, I've adapted, with a normal socket prosthesis, and I feel pretty comfortable now in that space. So yeah, I do think it depends on the person, certainly the timing, level of amputation. Um, but I still find it all incredibly engaging and fascinating from the musical standpoint. And there's so many blurred lines now in music, because of technology. Like, what's real, what's organic, what's engineered and processed, and what am I really listening to? And very often I'll get into this debate with some of my old school, older musicians, um, about, what has music become? And that's not real music. And
I
I,
get into these debates all the time.
I bet you do.
Yeah, and even in a studio, because I run a music studio, so
Yep.
even with a lot of engineers there, I've got one of my friends, and he's been engineering the longest there. He's very much an analog gearhead,
Okay.
and he's came around and admitted, but there's a lot of emulation, amps and modelers and stuff like that nowadays, and you really cannot tell the difference from some of these VSTs and modelers than the real instrument from the 60s, or the real amp from the 60s or 70s. You really can't. I mean, the only difference you'd be able to tell is maybe the air from the speaker moving, and like even then, like no one's picking that up. And so, yeah, there's a lot of just like, and even like, AI creation and stuff like that. It's like, what music has kind of become somewhat bastardized in the mainstream sense in a weird way, but ultimately, I'm in it for the love of music, and that's it. And I'll always love music, whatever it takes to kind of survive in this landscape, which, again, unfortunately kind of sucks. It's not even about music anymore. A lot of it's just about smoke and mirrors and posting your Instagram video or TikTok video or whatever so you can get big. It's like, I just want to make music, you
Yeah.
know
No, I
but
agree
I
with
can
you.
agree. I can agree with you 100%.
Yeah, the for me it's a form of art. It's creativity, and I will usually retort by saying, if my paintbrush is completely different than yours, it doesn't mean that I'm not creating anymore. It doesn't mean that
Mhm.
I'm not an artiste. It just means that I'm just using different tools. to reach my, you know, my final piece. And just because the tech or the timeline has allowed me to maybe do it at home, and you used to grind it out, in some studio somewhere, and you were using, 2-inch tape and, all of that stuff. What makes one more valid than the other? Don't blame me for being born, after 2000. I mean, what are we
Mhm.
talking about here? So I want to press into, hey man, if that feeds your creative monster and you're proud of what you're creating and you want to share it for the right reasons, then I think it's awesome. I
Yeah,
think
absolutely.
whatever you're doing, keep doing it, because some of the most brilliant people I know are creatives. They just come from that space of wanting to create something from nothing, and they're willing to put in the time. They're willing to dedicate how many thousands of hours it takes, to master, what goal they're trying to reach. And so much of researching what you've been through, going through the various stages of, evolution and adaptation, rediscovering your instrument, embracing the tech, finding other avenues, with your studio, with the nonprofit, all of that is such a huge exercise in just pressing into that creative force that's inside of you. And I really respect the hell out of it. How do you feel about being in the Guinness Book of World Records?
Well, I did think it was very strange. I remember my first. I know I owned a bunch of them, but my most memorable book that I owned
Yeah.
was the 2000 year. Um, I'm pretty sure I still have it somewhere, but yeah, when they had reached out to me, and we did it. It was 20 years later, so it was 2020 that I was in the book, and I just thought it was such a surreal moment. But um, yeah, they had reached out to me first, and I think initially they were aiming for most drum beats per minute, also known as fastest drummer in the world, and I refused because of various reasons. I don't think that's a fair title to claim when I'm using robotics or bionics. Um, at all, especially being a drummer, And so, we kind of went back and forth about it, and I was like, well, what if we do most drum beats per minute with a prosthetic arm? Because pretty sure, hopefully somebody will beat that soon. That means somebody's picking up on my tech and running with it, which is great. But I'm like, that seems like one that will stick in the book for a while, and I think that's reasonable versus most drum beats per minute, because I get enough haters online as it is. But yeah, just claiming the most drum beats per minute one was just a little let's do most drum beats with the prosthetic and call it. So that's what we did, and yeah, it was really cool. I flew out to Amsterdam and filmed the segment there with them. um yeah, that was really neat.
That's awesome. I mean,
Yeah, and then and then getting the book in the mail and just kind of
yeah,
seeing it, I
yeah,
was like, man, it's
exactly.
just so
Look at
strange
me.
seeing this 20 years ago, and I was like, oh, Guinness World Records are so cool. Look at the book. I'm like, I remember going through all the pages as a kid, and then here's the 2021 with me with a whole page on it. And I was like, man, this is
Yeah, and
surreal.
as
Very
far
very
as
humbling.
I want to just back up a little bit. This whole thing, like, haters and you're cheating and all this bullshit. It's like there is so much. There is so much that goes into adapting, thriving as an amputee. There is so much to this path,
Well,
and
not only that, but if you look at it from a creative standpoint, then what is cheating? So it's if you're looking at it as a competition and ego standpoint, then it's like, oh yeah, I'm the best guitar player in the world. I can shred better than John or Jimmy or whatever. And it's just like, okay, cool. That comes not from a creative standpoint at all. That's an egotistical standpoint. So it's like when you're talking about somebody creating something, but they're cheating. I don't get how that makes sense. It literally doesn't.
listen, I
um,
completely agree, and and I'm probably going to get some hate over this comment. Dude, I really struggle with the whole blast beat concept. I really do. I struggle with it. And I know it's an old school kind of thinking. And I'm not saying that some guys can't harness that energy in the right way, but I was brought up in a time when groove, feel, the emotion that you created through the instrument was way more important. The composing, the phrasing in which you were using as a player. I wasn't taught that drums were noise. I wasn't
Mhm.
taught that it was just something that was like racket in the house. No, my father was like, what are you trying to convey? What are you trying to pull out of the instrument? What emotions are you trying to evoke? So when I see a guy who has the ability to just go really, really fast, brrrr, with the feet, whatever it is, I'm kind of like, okay, but where are you placing that in the composition? What does that represent so much?
Time and a place for everything. There's definitely some drummers that are only quick and are not can't play a groove. There's some drummers that can play gospel chops like no other, and have a hard time playing a funk groove or whatever. And there's some that utilize everything. One of my favorite like internet drummers is Estepario. I don't know if you've seen any of his videos.
Is he
He
the
dude he
he's a Spanish guy, right?
yeah, he's beast because like
Yeah, yeah. But
his speed's phenomenal, but like also he has a
hey,
phenomenal groove.
I'm
Like
glad
he is
I'm
a good all around drummer.
see,
So
I
it's
didn't
like
know
yeah,
his
he can play
name. I didn't
fast,
know I just know
but
his
he can
logo.
groove too.
I know his logo with the
Yeah,
sticks.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
I'm glad you brought him up because you're right. That is a perfect example of someone who has harnessed the ability of just insane speed, but he's able to groove with it. He is able to place it, channel it in the right way, where he's taking those chops and he is integrating them into just popular music, and you think, holy cow, like that's incredible that guy
hmm
is playing a dance tune, right? And he's just lightning
Well,
fast.
He's mastered what we were talking about before, letting the sticks do the work and how they control. I mean, he's mastered that. I don't know if you've seen his videos where he's like one hand bouncing a stick off a hi hat
Yeah.
and like multiple sticks per hand and hi hat. I mean,
Yeah.
he's mastered how the instrument works, and
His stick control
understands how the
is
sticks work as well. And so he's
yeah.
just walks circles around people. But I mean, like that's what practicing 12 hours a day every day you know
No, his
does.
stick
But yeah.
control is it's surreal, it's bizarre to watch the amount of control he has over the physics behind what a drumstick does when you put energy towards it, right? He's like the Isaac Newton of like, drumming. Like he totally understands every nuance of what the stick's going to do depending upon how he, creates this, calculus to get it to do all these amazing things within, speed, groove, you know, meter. All of it is just like, oh my gosh. There's been times where I'll start watching one of his videos. I'll get like 10 seconds into it and I'm just like, oh my gosh, I can't even watch this. This is making me feel so inadequate
Yeah,
right now.
he's phenomenal. I can't remember how long I've been watching him for, but yeah, he's been one of my favorite internet
Yeah.
drummers for ever,
No, I'm so
and he
glad you,
plays anything and everything too.
yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up because it really put a cap like on the point that I was trying to make. Because I'll see these random videos where it's a guy he's blazing, on his double pedal, but there's no song, there's no
Mhm.
groove. I'm just kind of like, okay, it's kind of spastic, but cool. You can go really fast, right? Um, the other thing I wanted to talk about was a video I was watching actually this morning of you, Fred Armisen. How did that happen?
Yeah.
How did that happen?
Uh oh, like meeting him or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, that
Oh,
was so cool, man. That was so cool,
Yeah,
that
so
that
I
video you
actually was just
guys.
talking to him yesterday
Oh my
about this
gosh.
guitar pedal we're releasing with humanoid effects.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'll shout them out too. So Humanoid Effects is a guitar effects pedal company.
Okay.
They make phenomenal products. We just released a delay modulation pedal in collaboration with them, and 60% of the proceeds go to my nonprofit, which I'll bring up here before the end of the show.
Fred
But yeah,
Armisen,
Fred.
SNL.
So Fred, I met Fred through Billy Brimelcom. I'm
Oh
not sure if you
gosh.
know who Billy
Yeah,
Brimelcom
we
is.
we interviewed Billy last year.
Yeah, so he runs Steps of Faith and Thunder Gong, and so I met Billy in 2016 or 17 at the Hangar Ed Fair conference in Las Vegas. So I was playing their closing ceremony, I believe.
Okay.
So I did like a little drum solo, and Billy had came up to me and was like, "Hey, we're thinking about putting on this nonprofit event, fundraising event in Kansas City. My best friend's Jason Sudeikis. You know, yada yada yada." I'm like, okay, cool. Like I'd love to be a part of it. I'm like, yeah, you meet a lot of people when you go to shows that you never know where they stand with anything, and so I just kind of thought it was whatever.
I hear you.
And yeah, a couple months later, Billy reached out to me and was like, "Hey, we're doing this thing. We've got Sudeikis on board and Fred Armisen and Winona Judd. I was like, man, this is very surreal. Like, what
Very
is life right
surreal.
now?" And he was like, "We want you to be a part of it."
And now we
So
got
I went
Jason
out there.
Barnes, so hey, let's go.
Yeah, and so I went out there the first year we had it, and I've kind of been there since the beginning with them, and so that's kind of how I built the connection with Fred and Jason and everybody else. Um,
It's a really great video, and it's just, you guys
you're talking about the one
connecting.
with me explaining the robotic drum arm
Yeah.
to him, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Absolutely. And then you guys jam together.
yeah.
And that like looked like a very kind of vintage, kind of cool drum shop. Is he affiliated with that drum shop?
Pro, no, no, no. So that's Pro Drum Shop in Hollywood. They're like world famous drum shop
Okay.
there.
Got it.
Lot of world famous drummers just kind of stop in there on a Tuesday afternoon thing and test out some kits.
So when
Yeah,
Fred Fred Armisen
It's
calls,
been
they're
there
like,
for
"Yeah,
quite a
come on in.
while.
You want to do something? We'll let you do it
Yeah,
here."
yeah,
That's
for sure.
awesome. I love it.
Yeah, I'm sure they're used to it.
That's great.
Um,
No, I really enjoyed that video. It was very relatable, and I think it really demonstrates, when creative people connect and what can be accomplished in that, to inspire and educate and do all the things that you know you're doing and continue to do. So before I release you, Jason, let's talk about the nonprofit. Let's talk about that now.
yeah. So obviously we've been through my whole journey. So over the last few years, when I was finishing up this project with Google, my stipulations with that particular prosthetic was that I was going to be able to own everything, the code, hardware. I want to make it open source. I want people to be able to build off this. I want to be able to help everybody else out around the world. And so I kind of just stopped there with it, and that was it. And over, the last few years, kind of since some of these videos have come viral, I've had countless people reach out to me on various social media platforms. Just, hey, like I live in this country here, or some in the United States, like whatever, and that they've seen this video and it's such inspiration. They've always wanted to play drums, or they used to play drums and they lost a limb, or they want to learn how to play music or do something. And so they reached out with, not only is it like, oh, I inspired them, but like, how can I help them, you know and some of them are in like third world countries and stuff, and there's, I don't, what can I do over here without funding or like anything like that, like I don't know. And so that's kind of where the idea of the nonprofit started, with me and my friend Matt Bankston. We decided to start it in November of 2023. And the initial goal was just, let's help out other musicians with challenges, or soon to be musicians with challenges, whether they're an amputee, deaf, blind, whatever. It doesn't really matter. We want to be able to get them in the studio, teach them how to produce, teach them how to be in a studio, teach them how to perfect an instrument, whatever it is they need to learn how to do, what is kind of our goal. And it's kind of, taken off from there as far as in-kind donations with arguably probably 70% of the music industry. We've worked with Gibson, we've worked with Marshall, uh, D'Addario, countless software companies that have, kind of agreed to kind of back us and stuff. And so, you know, we, over the last year, we've helped out two students, um, two, two victims, I say. um, but Yeah, so essentially what we do with the nonprofit is called Cybernetic Sound. We provide a space and opportunity for musicians with challenges to come and learn how to create and produce music, learn how to use various different DAWs. So we teach Pro Tools, Ableton, Fruit Loop, or FL, that's what it's called now, Reaper, you name it. And so we teach them how to utilize different softwares for that too. So, like, say you don't have full use of your hands, you can utilize different eye tracking software and speech recognition software to
Wow.
control things in the DAW. And then on top of it, say you have a physical limitation, then we help develop adaptive equipment that can attach to prosthetics to kind of help them do whatever, whether it's play guitar, whether it's play drums. Um, and so, yeah, that's kind of the big goal with that. And, it's been a year. We've made a decent amount of progress. But again, this is something that started with just me, and it's been funded 100% by me since it started. I mean, we've gotten a few donations to kind of keep things running, but everybody we've helped out has been through me, because once I started it, even if I don't have funding, I can't tell someone no. I can't be like, hey, well, maybe in a year, so what we did is we kind of just took control. I've taken my own money. I've helped develop these prosthetics, and I've helped gifted them to them. And so what we're trying to do now is, one, try and acquire donations to kind of keep everything going, and two, trying to spread the word, which is what I'm doing now on the podcast, because it's all great if we have this organization, but if no one knows about us, then who are we helping? So those are my two biggest goals right now: is getting the word out about the nonprofit and getting funding to kind of keep things going.
Yeah, and that's really
And
important stuff. So let's try to be part of that initiative and build some momentum. What is the best way to reach out to you in terms of donation?
so, yeah, you can look up our nonprofit. It's cyberneticsound.org. You can find us on social medias. You can find me on social media. Um, my Instagram is cybernetics. So it's CYBRNETX. And then the nonprofit is Cybernetic Sound, on every social platform and website. And so the website will kind of give you a rundown of what we do, what we've done, and how we can help people around, and how everybody else can help us, whether it's in-kind donations of instruments that we can use to customize, whether it's monetary donations, whether it's, if you have some bit of a platform, then sharing the information and getting it out, because the more people that know about us, the more people that can reach out.
Yeah, super important. And yes, I was aware of cybernetics. However, I did not realize that this extended to people of all disabilities. Trying to broaden that spectrum of allowing people to get into a creative space and not be limited in terms of whatever challenges they are facing. And I so appreciate that you are channeling all of your energy, all of your what you've been through, and you're using it for good. And people like Billy Brimblecom and many of the other charitable people that I've interviewed, that I have tried to get out as much of their message as possible. Um, Please, to our listeners in 25 countries, this is a very, very worthwhile endeavor. If we do not encourage creativity in the minds of all people, disabilities and otherwise, we are lost as a society. We have to have these creative outlets, because it's so important to the development of the species. And not to get all scientific, but our evolution is critical in terms of feeding those creative monsters that we all have. We grow as a people, and as a world when we explore our creative selves. So, thank you. Thank you for doing that. And I'll make sure that we do plenty of promotion for
Well,
Cybernetics. And
thank you
that
so
way,
much. Yeah, I mean,
oh, no,
like I
it's,
said, my goal with this is getting it running properly and off the ground, and then ultimately the goal with this is to put myself out of business, because again, spreading the awareness is the big part of it. And I want it to get to a point where companies like Gibson and companies like Pearl and DW are doing their own due diligence to essentially put me out of a job, you
yep.
know. And that's kind of what I'm going here with this,
No, I get it.
So
I totally
and
understand what you're
then,
trying
yeah,
to do.
quick shout out to the other creatives and drummers on our panel too. Billy Brimmelcom is on our panel of advisors. Drummer, amputee, phenomenal.
Yep.
Also want to shout out, Andrew Tkachik. He's a close friend of mine, also a drummer from for the band The Ghost Inside. He's an amputee. I don't know if you're familiar with this story at all. Also
A
creative.
little bit.
He's developed. Him and his dad have developed his own prosthetic slash device for playing drums. So he plays double kick.
Yep.
He's an above the knee amputee, kick dominant kick leg. So yeah, phenomenal. I just wanted to give him a quick shout out there.
Awesome.
And yeah, I mean, just like you said, if we can't create, then
We're
we're
lost.
kind of doomed.
I
Yeah.
agree. I agree. In a world of division and tribal attitudes, there is something that does bring us together, Jason. It's called music. It
Hmm.
really, really unites people, and those creative spaces are so important
Not
right
only
now.
does it unite people, but it saves lives. So
Yes. Yep.
it saved my life, from depression and everything else that follows. And I've seen it save a lot of other people's lives, and you know
Yep. Me as
that's
well.
the power of it. Yeah.
No, I'm in the same
I don't know
camp.
what I would personally do without it. With
Yeah,
this ability
I am in
to
the
do what I do.
same place. The hairs on my arm still stand up when I hear certain pieces of music, and that is the one thing that I always had when I was sick was, hey, I guess I'm still alive. If that happens, that means I'm still here. So important life lessons there. Jason Barnes, thank you so much for being here. That is going to wrap it up for us today. My name is Rick Bontkowski. This is the Amp'd Up to 11 podcast, and I want to wish everyone health and happiness.